House lawmakers unveil a new plan to let parents use public funds to pay for private schools.
Public funds are supposed to be used for a public purpose, which is educating children.
The plan for education savings accounts now comes with a big boost for public funding. Why it's getting a skeptical response from opponents at the Capitol. An influential Texas congressman raises concern about the expanding war in the Middle East.
I've been asked to start looking at an authorized use of military force.
Why he says there could be a need for American troops on the ground.
Historic opportunity to make an investment in nature and in the great outdoors and to preserve wild Texas.
The future of Texas parks in your hands. The push for more than $1 billion for new places to get away from the city.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Monica Madden in for Josh Hinkle. As we enter week 3 of this third special session, House Republicans finally laid out their plan to create an education savings account. Those would allow parents to use taxpayer dollars for private school tuition. But writing the bill was only part of the challenge. ESAs have faced significant opposition from nearly all Democrats and a sizable group of rural Republicans. Now it's being tied to an increase in public school funding, which they do want to see passed this special session.
We have a school funding emergency in this state.
House Democrats announcing a sweeping school finance package Thursday. It would increase the basic allotment for public schools and raise teacher pay by $15,000, amongst other funding boosts. While House Republicans work on their school finance bill, Democrats have been clear.
They're standing united against vouchers.
They will not vote yes to an education savings account bill, also referred to as school vouchers.
Instead of passing a voucher scam, why don't we just fully fund our neighborhood schools so that everyone can thrive?
And Democrats aren't the only ones opposed, with at least 24 Republicans who have been against ESAs in the past.
I don't see the appetite in House District 18 in rural Texas for a voucher. It'll never be reined back in.
With a rural district, Representative Ernest Bales is steadfast in his belief.
We have to do what is best for the kids that need our love the most, and that is to have a very well-funded, very productive, very functional public education system.
Key Republican negotiators are hopeful adding public school funding to the ESA bill will get everyone on board.
It will be relatively broad and include a significant amount of money for public schools.
But they'll need to break through with the group that is against any form of so-called school choice, no matter what it's tied to.
We can walk and chew gum at the same time. At the end of the day, public funds are supposed to be used for a public purpose, which is educating children.
If we truly cared about what's best for the state of Texas, we would allow vouchers to stand alone rather than using those to hold captive.
We reached out to the governor's office for comment on the compromise legislation. A spokesman for him told us that Governor Abbott said he's not going to expand the session call until the House reaches a deal on education savings account. Now we want to go a little bit deeper on this topic. Joining us now is Sergio Martinez Beltran from NPR's The Texas Newsroom and Edward McKinley from the Houston Chronicle and San Antonio Express News. Thanks for joining us, you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. So Sergio, I want to start with you because you've been talking a lot with these rural Republicans who have been on the fence about this issue and have resisted really any form of the education savings account program. Do you think that this version will appeal to them because it includes the thing that they do want, which is a boost to public school funding?
It certainly is an attempt to try to convince some of these rural Republicans to vote for the voucher bill. I don't know how successful that will be, right? Rural Republicans have many other concerns besides funding for public schools. In many of these areas, it's school districts, the biggest employer. So they're worried that any effort to divert public funds to private schools will have a negative impact on that big employer. And they also don't know how this will benefit their voters. In many of these rural areas, there's no private schools, so a voucher won't be useful there.
Do you think this alliance of Democrats and Republicans who are against any form of a voucher-like program is going to hold the line? Because we have started to see some of those Democrats now say, well, maybe I would be open to, accepting this as a package in order for us to get some leverage on what we want.
Most House Democrats don't want it. If you ask the caucus, and we've been in those press conferences, they'll say no deals on school vouchers, and the majority are still, that's still their stance. I do wonder, right, whether Governor Abbott's political threats towards Republicans who oppose school vouchers, if that's going to have an effect on them. But right now we're seeing that rural Republicans in particular are even coming out stronger and saying that they're not going to vote for it.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting dynamic where the governor's office is saying we're not going to cut a deal on expanding the call until the House has a deal on vouchers. But the House has no incentive to come out in support of a voucher deal unless they know for sure they're going to get the education funding. So it's a bit of a chicken or the egg situation at the moment.
We have been hearing threats from Governor Abbott. He said that he will, back the primary challengers to these Republicans if they don't come on board and support the education savings account. Any sign that that is having an effect so far?
No, I mean, I think all of these people have been in office often for several terms. I mean, they're from rural areas. They have close relationships with their school districts. They know what it took to get elected in those communities. So I think, if you're going to be a politician, you have to be pretty self-confident. So I think a lot of them feel very confident in how they arrived at their view on vouchers, and they're not going to change just because of threats.
Sergio?
Yes, I talked to Senator Robert Nichols of Jacksonville, who has opposed school vouchers historically. And I asked him if he was afraid of a potential primary opponent. And he said last time he beat his opponent by 50%. And if the new primary opponent will run on school vouchers, he'll beat them again by 50%. So he feels very comfortable and confident, right, that he will still win, especially if they're just focusing on school vouchers.
Now let's talk about the proposal itself. Ed, you've done a ton of research on how these programs are working in other states. What did you learn?
Well, the main thing I learned is that there is not an easy answer, which feels like it probably should be obvious, because if there were, we wouldn't be spending as much time talking about it as we are. The big thing is that the most comparable states are Arizona and Florida. They've both had school choice voucher programs for a long time, but more recently have expanded them to be universally eligible. And one of the big things that we've seen is that in the first few years of the eligibility, a lot of the people who are taking advantage of these programs are existing private school kids. So that's potentially problematic, because a lot of the rhetoric for these bills is, well, we need to give kids in struggling public schools a chance to escape. We need to allow parents to pull their kids out of these public schools that, as Governor Abbott would say, they don't align with the values of the parents because they're trying to promote this woke ideology. But instead, as we're seeing in other states, at least at first, a lot of them are going to people already in private schools. But when you ask people like Senator Brandon Creighton, who authored the Senate bill, he says, well, maybe those people already left public schools years ago for some of the same reasons, and they shouldn't be punished. So that's one interesting thing that stuck out.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Lawmakers have a lot more money than expected to pay for high-profile priorities.
That's the biggest impact that you can make, is making sure it goes to the people who are what? Educating our children, responsible for transporting them safely to and from their homes and up to the schools and back. And so I think that is the most important piece that we can do, at least as a state.
How a newly discovered budget surplus could affect the approach at the Capitol to school funding and education savings accounts. Texas makes a big move to boost Israel's wartime economy. We'll look at what's behind a multi-million-dollar investment to help the American ally.